I realized my relationship was built on fear when a small, controlling comment exposed the truth. It reminded me of childhood fear and made me see that what I thought was love was actually control disguised as care. That moment gave me the clarity and strength to leave and start healing. I didn't realize I was afraid of him until I caught myself flinching when he walked into the room. It wasn't always like that. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't know what fear felt like in disguise. You see, I used to believe fear was something loud, something that screamed, slammed doors, left bruises. But fear can be quiet too. It can smile while it tightens its grip around your throat. It can look like love, sound like I'm just worried about you, and feel like butterflies until it doesn't. The moment I really knew that my relationship wasn't built on love, but fear, it changed everything. It shattered the version of reality I had clung to for years. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. This is the story of how I got there, and why I almost didn't make it out. I met him at the bookstore of all places. It was raining outside, and I was browsing the same shelf for the third time, trying to look like I wasn't waiting for the storm to pass. He asked if I had ever read the novel I was holding, and just like that, a conversation began. Effortless, natural, like we were meant to be there at that exact moment. He was funny and gentle and had this calm presence that made me feel like I could exhale around him. He remembered little things I said, like how I liked my coffee, or that I hated Mondays, and he'd text me just to say something thoughtful. Our first few dates felt like scenes from a movie. He brought flowers, opened doors, looked me in the eyes like I was the only person in the room. I remember thinking, finally, someone who sees me. He told me he had been through some hard things, but he said it in a way that made me feel special, like I was the only one he trusted to hear that part of him. And in return, I opened up to him too, maybe too fast. I told him things I hadn't told anyone. And instead of running, he pulled me in closer. I thought that was love. Within weeks, we were spending almost every night together. He'd cook dinner for me, play songs on his playlist that he said reminded him of me, and kiss my forehead before I fell asleep. Everything felt intense, but magical. It was like I had been waiting for someone just like him.
Someone who made me feel safe.
My friends noticed how quickly things were moving. One of them joked, "Wow, you're in deep already." Another asked me quietly if I thought he might be a little too intense. I laughed it off. They just didn't know him like I did. They didn't see the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. And my mom, she noticed something I didn't. She said, "He's very attentive, isn't he?" But the way she said it wasn't all admiration. There was something else there, something careful. I brushed it off, even felt a little defensive. I thought they were just being overly protective. Jealous, maybe. I had finally found someone who made me feel important. But looking back, I realized I was already ignoring little signs. Like how he always wanted to be the one to drive. Or how he seemed annoyed whenever I checked my phone during dinner. "I just want to have your full attention," he'd say, with a smile. And I took that as a compliment. The truth is, I mistook control for love. I mistook intensity for passion, and I mistook his need to be everywhere I was as a sign of commitment. I didn't see the difference yet. I was just a girl who thought she had found everything she ever wanted, wrapped up in a man who told her all the right things. The warning signs were there, I just didn't want to look too closely. It started with little things. At first he'd ask me to text him when I got home.
Sweet, right?
He just wanted to know I was safe. But then it became texting when I left somewhere. And then updates during where I was, who I was with, what time I planned to be done. If I forgot to check in, I'd come back to a flood of messages. "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering? Did something happen?" At first I felt cared for, like someone actually worried about me. But the tone changed over time. It went from concern to disappointment. He'd say, "I just love you so much, it drives me crazy when I don't know where you are." Or, "You wouldn't forget if it really mattered to you." I remember one time I met a friend for lunch, an old coworker, a guy, totally platonic. I told him ahead of time because I didn't want to make it weird. But when I came back, he was cold, quiet, distant. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "Nothing, Just surprised you thought it was okay to have lunch alone with another man. I felt my stomach drop. I explained. Over-explained, told him every detail. Laughed nervously, said I'd never keep secrets from him. And he just nodded slowly, then said, "It's okay. I'm just protective. It's how I love," and I believed him. Even when he started going through my phone. At first he asked, "Can I see your messages?" And I said yes, because I had nothing to hide. But later he stopped asking. I'd come out of the shower and find him scrolling. Or I'd wake up to my phone not where I left it. If I asked why, he'd say, "You act like I'm some stranger. If you're not hiding anything, what's the problem?" The worst part is, I agreed with him. I thought, maybe I do have trust issues. Maybe I'm being dramatic. He just wants honesty. He was so good at apologizing when he took things too far. Every time I got upset, he had a soft voice and sad eyes. He'd pull me into his arms and whisper, "I just don't want to lose you." Sometimes he even cried. And every single time I forgave him. Because how do you walk away from someone who says they're only like this because they love you too much? We had these cycles, tension, control, apology, affection, over and over again. I felt like I was on a spinning ride that never quite stopped, only slowed down just enough for me to catch my breath before it started again. I stopped telling my friends certain things. They'd started making comments. One of them said, "You're always defending him." And I remember snapping, because no one else sees the full picture. But the truth is, I didn't want them to see it. Because then I'd have to admit it was real. I stopped wearing certain clothes because he didn't like them. I stopped talking to old friends because he said they didn't respect our relationship. I stopped posting on social media because he said, "We don't need to share our lives with strangers." At the time I called it compromise. I called it maturing. I told myself love requires sacrifice. But inside, a part of me was shrinking. Getting quieter, less sure of itself. And sometimes, I felt nervous before I spoke. Like I had to rehearse what I wanted to say. Like I needed to check the tone of my voice before I gave him news he might not like. I thought that was normal. I thought all couples had their ups and downs. But deep down, something in me was changing. And I didn't know yet. That fear was slowly replacing love. Some days he made me feel like the most cherished person in the world. He'd show up with my favorite snacks, run a bath for me after a long day, tell me how proud he was to have someone like me in his life. I lived for those moments. They felt like proof that everything was okay, that we were okay, but it never lasted long. The warmth would vanish without warning. I'd say something he didn't like, or forget to answer a text quickly enough, and suddenly his tone would go flat. Cold. I'd ask if something was wrong, and he'd sigh, shake his head and say, "Forget it. It's not worth talking about." I'd beg him to talk to me, tell me what I did, try to fix it, but he'd just say, "You always make everything about you. You never think about how your actions affect me." And just like that, I was the problem again. At first I tried to argue. I'd say, "That's not what I meant," or "I didn't do anything wrong." But it always turned into something bigger, a full-blown fight, or worse, complete silence for hours. Sometimes even days. Eventually I stopped arguing. I just apologized. Even when I didn't understand what I was apologizing for. He had a way of twisting things. Like when I told him I missed my friends and wanted to plan a weekend with them. He said, "So I'm not enough for you?" Or when I laughed too much at someone's joke at a dinner party, and he said, "Glad to know someone else can make you that happy." It got to a point where I questioned my own reactions to everything. I stopped trusting my instincts. I second-guessed every word I said, every step I took. I even started journaling arguments. Not to process my feelings, but to keep track of what had actually happened. Because somehow, by the end of every disagreement, I would feel confused, like maybe I really had misunderstood him. Like maybe it really was my fault. That's when I started to feel scared. Not of him hitting me. He never laid a hand on me. But of his moods. Of the silence. Of saying the wrong thing. Of disappointing him. I stopped seeing my family as often. When I did go visit, I avoided talking about him because I didn't want the questions. Didn't want their eyes on me, full of suspicion and concern. I told them I was just tired, or busy with work. That everything was fine, that he was just going through a lot. It was easier to isolate myself than to constantly defend him. He had become the center of my world, not because he filled me with joy, but because I was always trying to manage his reactions, keep things calm, avoid another cold front. Some nights I cried quietly in bed beside him, facing the wall, and when he noticed, he'd turn toward me and say, "God, you're so emotional all the time. I never know what version of you I'm going to get." That one stung, because I had been thinking the exact same thing about him. But I said nothing. I just apologized again, rolled over, dried my tears. There were still good days. Of course. Days when he smiled at me like I was his whole world. When he wrapped his arms around me and said, "What would I do without you?" And I'd melt, and tell myself this was love. But underneath it all, something in me was quietly unraveling. I felt tense all the time. I walked around on eggshells. My body was always bracing for something I couldn't name. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't in love anymore. I was just afraid. Afraid to make him angry. Afraid to be alone. Afraid that if I left, maybe I'd find out that he was right. That everything was my fault. It happened on a Thursday. I remember that detail because Thursdays were our movie night. A silly little routine we had to make the week feel less heavy. We'd pick a film, order food, and pretend like things were normal. That night, I was running late from work. My boss had kept me for a last-minute meeting, and by the time I left the office, my phone was full of missed calls and unread messages from him. They started off concerned. "Everything okay? You're usually home by now. Are you ignoring me?" Then they got sharp. "You're always doing this. You can't even respect our time together. If you don't want this relationship, just say it." I remember feeling my heart race as I drove home. I rehearsed an apology in my head, not because I believed I had done anything wrong, but because I didn't want to fight. When I walked through the door, he was standing in the kitchen, still, silent, like he had been waiting for me to mess up. I smiled weakly and said, "I'm so sorry work ran late." Before I could finish, he slammed his fist down on the counter. The sound cracked through the room. I jumped. It was the first time I had ever flinched because of him. He didn't hit me. He didn't touch me. But that slam. It was like a signal. Something in my body registered danger. Real physical danger. I stood frozen, waiting to see what he'd do next. He started pacing, ranting, saying things like, "You never listen, and I do everything for you, and you treat me like this." His voice got louder, faster. His words weren't making sense anymore. Then he looked at me with a glare I'd never seen before and said, "Maybe I should just go. Maybe I should disappear. Would that make you happy?" And suddenly I wasn't afraid of him leaving. I was afraid of what he'd do if I said yes. I begged him to calm down. I said it wasn't that serious. I said we could just watch the movie. I laughed nervously, trying to bring us back to something safe. Anything safe. That's when he picked up the remote and threw it. Not at me, but across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. I stared at it in pieces on the floor, and I knew I had never been in control. Not even a little. All those times I thought I was choosing to stay, compromising, keeping the peace. I had just been managing him, dodging landmines, trying to survive without making it obvious I was doing so. In that moment, something inside me snapped, not out of rage, but out of grief. A deep, slow, aching grief. Because I saw everything clearly for the first time. I saw the time he took my car keys during an argument and told me I wasn't safe to drive. I saw the night he stood outside the bathroom door for an hour after we fought, just waiting. I saw the way my laughter had dimmed around other people, how my voice had gotten smaller, my shoulders tense. I saw how I'd stopped calling my sister because she never liked him anyway. All of it. It came flooding back. Moments I had dismissed, excused, forgotten. I wasn't safe. Not emotionally. Not mentally. And if I was honest with myself, maybe not even physically anymore. He didn't need to hit me to make me fear him. I spent so long trying to believe I had power in that relationship. I told myself I stayed because I chose love. But in reality, I stayed because I was scared. Scared to start over. Scared to face the truth. Scared that maybe no one else would want me after all the pieces he'd chipped away. That night, after he calmed down, he cried, told me he was sorry, that he didn't mean it, that he was just under stress. He held me like he always did after an outburst. Like I was something breakable he didn't want to lose. And I let him. I sat in his arms, silent, eyes wide open. But inside, something was different. Something had broken. And not the remote. Me. I realized the silence I'd once mistaken for peace was actually fear. The butterflies in my stomach had never been excitement. They were nerves. The love I thought we shared had been control with a smile. And here's the twist I never saw coming. I thought I was strong for staying. But the truth is, I was strong the moment I saw it, for what it really was. That night, I didn't leave. But I started planning how I would. Because once you see fear, once you feel it sitting where love should be, you can't unfeel it. And that's when everything began to change. From the outside we looked fine. I still posted pictures now and then, smiling, holding hands, celebrating birthdays or anniversaries. I laughed in the right moments. I told people, we're good, just dealing with the usual couple stuff. No one asked too many questions. And I made sure they didn't have a reason to. But inside, I wasn't okay. Not even close. I started waking up with my heart pounding for no reason. My body would shake without warning. I'd feel dizzy at work, breathless in the grocery store, like the world was closing in. My doctor said it was anxiety. I told her it was just stress. I lost weight, not intentionally. I just stopped feeling hungry. Meals felt like a chore. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed for hours, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, my mind stuck on a loop. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? Why can't I leave? But I couldn't tell anyone. Not really. I told myself that if I opened up, people would judge me. Or worse, they'd tell me to leave. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to face the shame, the questions, the pity in their eyes. So I kept the secret. Smiled through panic attacks. Chatted at lunch, while hiding the shaking in my hands. Showed up to family dinners. And said, he's just working tonight. Even when I was glad he wasn't there. I clung to little moments of kindness from him, like they were lifelines. Sometimes he'd leave a note on the fridge. I know I've been off lately. I'm trying. Or he'd bring me flowers after an argument, and say, you deserve better than my moods. One time, after a particularly rough week, he surprised me with a necklace. Nothing fancy, but he put it on me gently and said, you're the only good thing in my life. And my heart cracked wide open. Because that's all I needed to hear, to stay a little longer. I'd look at him during those moments, when his eyes were soft, when his voice was calm, and I'd think, see, he's not a monster, he's just broken. And maybe I can help fix him. I started telling myself that I was the problem. That maybe I was too sensitive, too needy, too quick to overreact. I even wrote in my journal, maybe I'm just hard to love. That was my reality. Hiding bruises that didn't show on my skin, wearing makeup over the exhaustion, saying I was just tired when I looked hollow in the mirror. I didn't know then that the numbness was its own kind of pain. Not loud, not screaming, just always there. I stopped looking forward to things. Birthdays, holidays, weekends, all felt the same. Like things I had to get through, rather than enjoy. I kept waiting for something to shift, for him to go back to how he was in the beginning. But I didn't realize that man never truly existed. He was part of the hook, the trap, and I was stuck. Still smiling, still pretending, still keeping the secret. Even from myself. It wasn't a big fight. No yelling, no slammed doors, no broken things. It was small. So small. In fact, I almost missed it. I had just gotten back from the grocery store. One of the rare moments I went out alone. I was putting away the groceries when he walked in and scanned the bags. "What's all this?" he asked. "Just stuff for the week," I said, still smiling, still soft. He reached in and pulled out a box of cereal, a kind he didn't like. "Why'd you buy this? You know I don't eat this crap." I hesitated. "It's for me." He looked at me, really looked at me, like I'd just insulted him. "So now you're wasting money on food only you want." That was it. That's all he said. And somehow, that was the moment everything cracked wide open. Because the way he said it wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cold, controlling. It wasn't about the cereal. It was about the message underneath. "You don't get to choose. You don't matter unless I say you do." And before I could stop it, a memory came rushing back, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 8, sitting on the floor of my childhood bedroom, clutching a doll my father didn't like me playing with. He didn't yell. He just looked at me, with that same expression. Disappointed. Distant. Like I was small and stupid and selfish. And he said, "Why would you want something like that? What a waste." I'd forgotten how that made me feel. Until now. Like my wants didn't matter. Like love was something I had to earn by making myself smaller, quieter, more obedient. And here I was, decades later, reliving that same script. I stood there, holding that cereal box, and I felt it. Sadness, yes, but also anger. Not the kind that burns hot, the kind that simmers, quiet, steady, ready. Because for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the man I loved, but as the man who made me disappear. Slowly, gently, with care and concern, and control disguised as devotion. And I realized, it had never been love. Not the real kind. Real love doesn't monitor your grocery list. It doesn't make you afraid to speak. It doesn't shrink you into someone you don't recognize. I looked up at him and said, "It's just cereal." He scoffed and walked away. The moment passed for him, but not for me. Something shifted that day. Something permanent. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't pack a bag and storm out. But inside, I was done. Done justifying. Done apologizing. Done hoping. That night, I made a quiet plan. I started putting money aside. I told my best friend the truth. Really told her. I reached out to a counselor. I picked up every broken part of myself I could find, and whispered, "You're still here. I see you now." It took a box of cereal to wake me up. But it also gave me something else. The memory of who I used to be. And the strength to become her again. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming match. No suitcase thrown into the trunk. No threats exchanged. No tears. It was quiet. I left on a Tuesday morning. I got up before he did. Packed a small bag. Just the essentials. I didn't slam a single door. I didn't even leave a note. I just walked out. My heart was racing the entire time. I kept expecting him to wake up, to catch me, to stop me, but he didn't. And when I shut the door behind me, the silence that followed wasn't cold or threatening. It was peaceful, not because everything was fine, but because for the first time in a long time, I was free. I didn't go far, just to a friend's house. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask a single question. She just hugged me and said, "You're safe now." I cried that night. Not because I missed him, but because I missed me. The version of me that used to laugh without hesitation. That used to dream out loud. That didn't double-check her words before she spoke. That wasn't afraid of coming home. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Therapy was hard. Sitting in a room and saying things out loud that I had spent years hiding. There were days I felt strong. And days I wanted to go back, just because it felt familiar. Safe in a twisted way. I'd hear his voice in my head. "You'll never find someone who loves you like I do." And I'd whisper back, "I hope not." I had to relearn simple things. How to make a decision without checking with someone first. How to eat when I was hungry, not when someone else gave permission. How to sleep through the night, without waking in a panic. Loneliness came in waves, but I started filling it with real things. Books, music, long walks where I didn't have to explain myself. I started writing again, something I had stopped doing, because he said it was a waste of time. I wrote about everything. The fear, the silence, the little wins, like smiling in the mirror, or making my favorite breakfast just because I could. There were setbacks. Of course there were. Some days I felt broken beyond repair. But every time I showed up for myself, even in the smallest way, I healed a little more. And one day I woke up and realized, I didn't miss him at all. I didn't miss walking on eggshells, or monitoring my words, or shrinking myself so he could feel bigger. I missed who I had been before him. But even more, I was proud of who I was becoming after him. I learned that love doesn't hurt like that. It doesn't control, or scare, or silence you. It holds you gently. It listens. It grows with you. And most importantly, I learned that I am not too hard to love. I just needed to stop accepting a version of love that was rooted in fear. So if you're listening to this, and something inside you feels familiar, if your body has been whispering what your mind isn't ready to admit, listen. Because the quietest moments, the cereal box, the offhand comment, the pause before a scream, those are the ones that tell the truth. And the bravest thing I ever did wasn't walking away from him. It was walking back to myself. The moment I truly knew. It wasn't the fights. It wasn't the isolation. It wasn't even the day I walked out. It was weeks later. I was sitting at a cafe by myself. The sun was warm. The coffee was hot. And for the first time in years, I felt safe. Not euphoric. Not overjoyed. Just safe. And that's when it hit me. This is what love is supposed to feel like. Peaceful. Quiet. Still. Not tight-chested. Not tense. Not like walking through a minefield of moods and guessing games. I had spent so long confusing fear for love because that's how it was packaged. Wrapped in apologies, in compliments, in those rare moments of tenderness that made the hurt feel bearable. But love, real love, doesn't make you disappear. It doesn't silence your voice. It doesn't make you question your worth. If you're listening right now, and you feel that knot in your stomach, the one that tightens when their name lights up your phone, when you hear their key in the door, I want you to know something. That's not love. Love doesn't live in fear. You don't have to wait for a blow-up or a breakdown. You are allowed to leave quietly.
It's same to choose peace over chaos, to choose yourself. You are not weak for staying.
I know why you did, but you are strong for even thinking about leaving. And one day, you will look back and realize it wasn't the ending of your life. It was the beginning. If this story touched you, please like, comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who's waiting for that one moment of clarity.